My name is Lorraine Smith, and I'm a dance artist and senior dance lecturer at Teesside University. I have extensive experience performing and choreographing for dance theatre and costume-based projects, including 6 years working for the MA Costume Design for Performance at London College of Fashion, LCF. My research focuses on costume in relation to performance and dance pedagogy. The aim of this presentation is to discuss the creation of costume performance from the perspective of shared agency to answer the question, who is choreographing the costume performance? This question will be answered via an investigation of pedagogical approaches of the MA Costume Design for Performance at LCF, costume in relation to dance education, collaboration in dance making, and an analysis of the costume performance Elizabeth and the Three Sisters, and agency in relation to devising costume performance. I will use my own experiences in artistic work to evidence and explore the concept of shared agency in costume performance, leading to proposed new terminology to encapsulate the creative process involved in devising costume performance. But why this question? There is a clear underrepresentation of costume in dance performance and education, with costume still very much considered a minor component in the traditional hierarchy of performance. But equally, there are moments when the performer is ignored in the field of costume. For example, the costume performance images exhibited at the Innovative Costume of the 21st Century Conference 2019 listed the designer and photographer, but not the performer, leading to a later debate regarding the erasure of performer identity and agency. It is therefore essential to understand the complexity of the making of costume performance, and from an artist's perspective, the more we understand the agency of each element and how they interact, the more effective costume performance projects can be. As stated, I had the privilege of working as performer and choreographer at LCF. These experiences and subsequent research allowed me to recognise the power of costume and identify the impact costume can have on the moving body. My time with LCF enlightened me to the exciting potential of costume as creative impetus and meaning maker. From a performer's perspective, I learnt that costume design choices are all creating a sensorial experience that affects how the wearer feels, moves, and breathes, evidencing the somatic and haptic nature of costume. This porousness between body and costume can also create an internal and external transformation in the wearer, impacting their sense of identity. The MA course was established in 2006 by scholar and scenographer Donatella Barbieri. The course design was informed by Barbieri's in-depth academic and practical research into design and performance, including examination of the founding principles of physical theatre teacher Jacques Lecoq and the creative approaches of the Laboratoire d'études du mouvement, LEM, a branch of experimental study within Lecoq's École Internationale de Theatre. Barbieri embedded into the course design a movement-based approach to the development of costume and a costume-based approach to methods of devising performance. Incorporating the LEM approach of a rehearsal room-based design process that invites openness, curiosity, intuition, and learning by doing, undoing, and redoing, the designer is able to explore narrative, character, and metaphor inspired by a text. These innovative pedagogical methods inspire the students to create performance with the moving body at the heart of the design process, interweaving material and physical embodiment to successfully and intimately communicate the human condition to an audience. Working with LCF has also affected my own pedagogical approaches. This includes incorporating costume into historical, theoretical, and practical teachings of dance, including the facilitation of costume-led performance projects. Through these projects, students have been able to re-experience their bodies through costume, allowing for improved articulation of movement, embodiment, performance confidence, audience connection, and increased creativity and risk with artistic decisions. There is a complex and rich relationship and playful dialogue between designer, costume, and performer in the making of costume performance. The costume allows transformation of identity, of perception of the body, of movement, and of narrative. The performer brings the costume alive through their movement and interaction, adding their own identity, creativity, and interpretation. Trimingham describes this as designers and practitioners infusing costume with its agency through their kinetic empathy. Trimingham also suggests materials and material form upon or rather with the body realize that agency. However, Costume can also act as a performing entity without the performer, and even become another performer to interact with. It is therefore evident that all elements involved, including the raw materials in a costume performance, have agency and can theoretically contribute to the process and final outcome. With this understanding of agency, it is timely to reveal that my presentation question, who is choreographing the costume performance, is somewhat of a red herring. It could be argued all artists and objects, i.e. costume and materials, are co-choreographing the costume performance through a sharing of agency. Hence the question should be, how is the costume performance choreographed? There is a clear spectrum of dance making between the didactic, ultimate directorial control, and the democratic, through collective collaboration. Contemporary dance making tends to involve devising approaches where the dancer is very much part of the creative process, even if the shared authorship is not always acknowledged. Crickmay describes the concept of devising as being synonymous with a non-hierarchical, collaborative approach to making. However, Hedden and Millin question whether devising approaches can be truly democratic and non-hierarchical, as it has and still is very common for artistic directors and choreographers to lead the devising process, acting as the main decision maker and controlling the final vision of the performance. So how does a project team maintain true democratic and non-hierarchical principles when engaged in collaborative devising methodologies? Tarko asserts the importance of differentiating between cooperation as a mode of working together towards a common goal that does not preclude hierarchy or leadership within the group, and collaboration as a mode of working where democracy and collective decision-making are priorities. Tarko also identifies the philosophical concept of collective intentionality, in which all collaborators are focused on the same goals, values, etc. This can arguably only be achieved with joint decision-making and shared responsibility. Somatic dance artist and lecturer Dr. Barbour highlights that respect and acknowledgement for all involved is integral to the collaborative process, and cites Grant Kester, who states that collaboration evokes a form of art practice defined by openness, listening, and intersubjective vulnerability, which echoes the principles of the Lem approach mentioned earlier. Barbour also asserts that collaborative processes can assist a shift in the roles of individuals within a group to facilitate greater communication, acknowledgement of different contributions, and potentially shared ownership of both process and products. Therefore, a fluidity or blurring of roles can increase interaction, and through constant interaction, Tarko argues, agency is instigated. Finally, in relation to collaborative performance, Mitra advocates the term embodied subject over body to signal the lived reality that energizes devising processes and performance over the historical passive manifestation in which the body is seen merely as a tool of communication, that is to say, devoid of agency. In 2016, I collaborated with sculptor Annie O'Donnell and sound artist Peter Heselton to create the costume performance Elizabeth and the Three Sisters. Commissioned by Stellar Projects, the brief was to create an outdoor, site-specific, family-friendly piece for the event Nightfall. The piece was to combine movement, sound, and wearable sculpture made from unconventional man-made materials to explore historical, mythical, and futuristic themes relating to Elizabeth I and the Tees Valley. This project used costume as choreographic starting point, in which the assimilation of costume as a dynamic sculptural and expressive form would be used to stimulate and be integrated with the moving body in performance. The first stage of the project was to collect and play with the materials in their natural forms. This involved observation and discussion of experiences and initial ideas, which costume designer Kate Lane refers to as a mimodynamic process of observing and creating. Play continued with the early designs of the wearable sculptures. This initial development stage was very much inspired by the Lem approach and allowed the team to explore without overt consideration of narrative and themes. The costume items, developed over a month-long period, guided the choreography and final structure of the performance, as well as the soundscape. For both myself and designer O'Donnell, our ability to listen, respond to, and be in dialogue with the materials, instead of trying to control it, allowed the agency of the materials to flourish and influence the costume design and final performance. Lane describes this interaction with the materials and costume as a sensorial and experiential approach founded through embodied play that engages subtle haptic communication. The forming of choreography and piece structure was guided by the final wearable art costume pieces. As Crickmay explains, artwork emerges unpredictably through successive acts of noticing and response, with the form gaining refinement as the artists notice more in the detail. But that at a certain stage, the work transcends its ingredients and seems to become something, a coherent but shifting entity that flows in time and space. Crickmay refers to this process as a principle of emergence. For our project, although there was an overarching narrative and themes, the final form of the performance was allowed to emerge through multiple interactions, a sharing of agency, between the materials, wearable art, project artists, and the embodied subject, i.e. the performer. The emergence of the performance was able to occur through a successful collaborative process set up in a working environment of respect and acknowledgement of each project member. As a collective of artists, we all agreed on the project goals, themes, and narrative. Although in this project we mostly stuck to our own disciplines, there was no hierarchy, and we democratically shared the decision-making and responsibility of delivering the commission. There was also consistent interaction between the artists throughout the project, in particular, observation of play, sharing of witnessed outcomes, and ongoing dialogue about the developing meanings of the wearable art, movement, and choreographic forms. At the Costume and Fashion in Context and Practice Conference 2016, dancer and educator Michelle Mann and designer and educator Mann Summerlin shared the concept of costume as choreographer in their presentation Porcelain Moves, When Costume Choreographs and Perceptive Fragility. Reflecting on this concept in relation to Elizabeth and the Three Sisters, I surmise that as much as the costume is choreographed in the piece, this can only be achieved through the skill and experience of the performer and/or choreographer to unleash the creative potential the costume has to offer. I then coined the term costumeographer as the next logical step in defining and describing my role as a choreographer and performer when creating costume performance. I have since realized that this term is a one-dimensional, choreographer-centric perspective on what is a much more complex process. I have also discovered the Slovenian word for costume designer is costumegraph, so the term is also UK-centric. I therefore need to consider costume performance methodology from a multi-dimensional perspective in which all people and elements are contributing agency. Hence, I have formulated the following costume performance methodology. Firstly, a collaborative working approach should be established. This should be democratic, non-hierarchical, respectful, and trusting. Collective intentionality should be identified at the beginning, with an aim to facilitate shared decision-making and responsibility. The working approach can function with fixed or fluid roles. However, it's worth noting the potential benefits of non-disciplinary co-creator roles that also facilitates a sharing and developing of artistic practice. The creation phase should be instigated through interactions of embodied play between the collaborators and materials and costumes, which may take a similar form to the aforementioned LEM approach. These types of interactions should be mimodynamic in nature via the use of listening, witnessing, sharing, responding, etc., both verbally and non-verbally, allowing for haptic communication to take place. Through these interactions, the agency of all collaborators and elements are able to materialize, merge, and flourish, facilitating a journey of embodied sense-making leading to the creation of a final costume performance, referred to here as the emergent form. So to conclude, I want to suggest two working terms to signify this recommended methodology that encompasses both disciplines of movement and choreography and costume design. The first is costumeographic synergy, and the second is choreo-costuming. These terms are of course suggestions and very much open to debate and development. It is imperative that we continue to critique and articulate the creative processes and outcomes in the creation of costume performance, not only within the relevant fields of research, but in education and to the audience, to better understand and evolve artistic practice. Finally, it is clear through investigating the question, who is choreographing the costume performance, that the devising of such work is a beautifully complex collaborative process that involves a unique sharing of agency, where all elements are essential to realizing a costume performance. Thank you.